Tonight, before we drift into the quiet world of history, I want to ask you gently, how are you feeling right now? Has today been a long one for you, or maybe just an ordinary day that slowly moved along? And what time is it as you are listening to this story? Is it late at night, with the moon resting above your window, or perhaps the soft early hours of the morning when the world is still? Wherever you are, whatever the hour, I welcome you warmly into this calm space. Together, let us set aside worries for a while and step back into the gentle shadows of ancient Rome, not through noise or grandeur, but through the quiet rhythm of daily life. Before we begin, I kindly invite you, in the calmest way, to support this journey by liking this video, subscribing to the channel, and gently turning on the bell so you may return again when the next history story arrives. No rush, no pressure, only a simple reminder, because each time you return, another doorway to the past will quietly open. This small action helps keep these peaceful stories flowing, and I am deeply thankful for your presence here tonight. Now, let us slowly wander back through time. Imagine the year is somewhere in the 1st century, when the Roman Empire stretched across many lands, and the city of Rome itself was alive with sound and movement. But instead of marching soldiers or shouting crowds, let us notice something softer: a family gathering inside a quiet home. Lamps glowing gently, voices low and kind. For the Romans, leisure was not only about grand spectacles, it was also about the warmth of being together, of sharing little joys after a long day. In this story, we will walk not through battles or politics, but through the lighter corners of Roman life, the parts that brought smiles, laughter, and rest. Picture a modest Roman house at the end of a cobbled street. Its walls are plain, perhaps painted with simple murals, and its courtyard holds a small fountain. Children sit on the floor, tossing little knucklebones, a game as old as memory itself, while their parents watch with quiet smiles. The laughter of the children is soft, not loud, and it lingers like a gentle song in the air. Even here, centuries away, we can feel the comfort of these ordinary moments. They remind us that the human heart, no matter the time or place, has always found joy in the simplest of games. As the evening deepens, one can imagine the family gathering around a low wooden table. A board carved with lines and patterns lies ready for play. Adults move small stones across it, competing in quiet strategy, just as many of us might do today with a deck of cards or a puzzle. There is no rush, no great prize, only the enjoyment of thought and company. Outside, the city may be busy, but here, time moves slowly. These moments of stillness gave Romans the same comfort that restful activities give us now. The air outside the home carries faint scents of bread and olive oil from nearby bakeries. Neighbors exchange greetings as they pass, perhaps stopping for a short conversation before continuing their evening walk. In Rome, community life was not only in the great forum, but also in these smaller, everyday exchanges, sharing news, laughter, or simply a kind glance. Within these gentle acts, we can glimpse the softer side of history. It is not the kind that shouts, but the kind that whispers, reminding us that people long ago also valued warmth and connection. Imagine the streets now, as twilight settles. Lamps flicker along the pathways, casting golden circles on the stone ground. Merchants close their shops, drawing wooden shutters, while travelers make their way home. The voices grow quieter, the city hums slowing, and the rhythm of evening taking hold. For the Romans, as for us, there was comfort in routine, in knowing that after the busyness of the day, night would arrive with its promise of calm. And within that calm, Simple joys waited to be found, even in a mighty empire. Not everyone lived in marble palaces or attended great banquets. Most Romans found happiness in humble surroundings, sharing meals of bread, fruit, and water, sitting with friends, or listening to a neighbor tell a story. These were not the tales of heroes or rulers, but the small stories of daily life. Such moments were the foundation of contentment, gently balancing the weight of labor with the lightness of laughter. Through them, we remember that history is not only written in monuments, but also in ordinary evenings such as these. Let us return for a moment to the image of children playing. Their games were not only for amusement, but also for learning patience, skill, and observation. The sound of their knucklebones clattering softly on the floor is almost like a lullaby, steady and familiar. Parents watch, sometimes joining in, their voices calm and encouraging. It is a reminder that leisure, even in Rome, was not separate from family, was woven into the fabric of home, where love and laughter mingled in quiet harmony. As the night moves on, the city outside grows more still. The stars above Rome are the same stars that shine over us today, constant and unchanging, given by the Creator to guide and comfort His creation. Under this sky, Romans found peace in endings, in letting go of the day. And just as we settle into calm tonight, so too did they thousands of years ago. The world changes, empires rise and fall, but the human desire for rest remains the same. It is this timeless rhythm that connects us to them across the centuries, through the quiet language of leisure. The lamps inside the Roman house continue to glow softly, their gentle light casting long shadows on the floor. Conversations flow slowly, with pauses as family members think, smile, or sip from simple clay cups. Outside, the occasional sound of footsteps passes by, but within these walls, the pace of life is calm. To imagine such an evening is to realize that peace is not bound to one culture or century. It is part of the human condition, present wherever people allow themselves a moment of quiet. In this way, the Romans were not so different from us. If you were to step into their home, you might find shelves lined with everyday objects. A jar of olives, a loaf of bread wrapped in cloth, or a jug of fresh water drawn from the fountain. These were not luxuries, but blessings of sustenance, provided through the natural world created by the Almighty, who gives provision to all creatures. For the Romans, the simple act of sharing food was a joy in itself. Families often sat together, not for ceremony, but for togetherness, letting the bonds between them grow stronger. Sometimes neighbors or friends would join. They would bring a small gift, perhaps a handful of dates, or a piece of fruit and share in the evening hours. Such gatherings were not loud or crowded, but warm and thoughtful, filled with quiet laughter and the retelling of events from the day. It was through these gentle connections that Romans built trust and community. Even across centuries, we can sense the comfort of these traditions, because the value of kindness never fades, no matter the era. Outside the city walls, farmers ended their work in the fields. After long hours under the sun, they too found pleasure in rest. Sitting by the doorway of a small farmhouse, they could watch the horizon fade into twilight, the air cooling as the stars began to shine. For them, leisure was not about grand entertainment, but about the gift of pausing, of letting the mind breathe after toil. It is a reminder that across history, ordinary people have always found joy in rest after effort. In the heart of Rome, the Forum was still alive with soft activity. Though quieter than during the day, small groups lingered, speaking in low tones, exchanging thoughts about trade, family, or simple news. It was as if the square itself held a rhythm, pulsing gently even at night. Some people came not to speak, but to listen, to observe, or simply to feel part of the larger world around them. Leisure, after all, was not always about doing it, could also be about being, about existing quietly among others. Imagine yourself walking through that forum. The stone beneath your feet is cool. The columns rise tall above, and the voices drift like soft echoes. A musician may pluck a gentle tune on a stringed instrument, not for performance, but for personal enjoyment, with those nearby pausing to listen for a moment. The sound is simple, almost meditative, reminding us of how music has always been a companion to human rest. Even in Rome, melodies carried people into states of ease, bridging the distance between work and sleep. And as the night deepens, families draw closer to their beds. Children curl under blankets, parents whisper a final goodnight, and the household grows still. The quiet is not empty, it is filled with the comfort of safety, the knowledge that tomorrow will bring new work, new games, and new laughter. To imagine such a scene is to feel the weight of centuries lift, leaving only the universal truth that all people seek rest. Rome may be far away in time, but its evenings feel surprisingly familiar. This gentle picture of Roman life teaches us something valuable, that fun did not always mean excess or noise. Sometimes it meant simply being present with loved ones, sharing a meal, playing a game, or listening to the night. These lessons of the past remind us that leisure is not measured in grand moments, but in the quiet details that calm the heart. And as you listen tonight, perhaps you too can feel the softness of such history wrapping gently around you. So here, at the close of our first step into what did Romans do for fun, let us pause. We have walked through their homes, listened to their laughter, and sat quietly as night fell over the city. This is only the beginning of our journey, and more awaits in the chapters to come. But before we leave this gentle scene, I would like to ask you, with calm sincerity, to share your thoughts in the comments below. Perhaps tell me what part of Roman leisure feels most peaceful to you. Your words help this small community grow, just as Roman gatherings strengthened their bonds long ago. And if you wish to return for the next story, remember to subscribe, like, and turn on the bell quietly at your own pace whenever you are ready. For now, rest easy, knowing that history is a gentle companion, guiding us slowly toward sleep. Until we meet again in the next segment, may this calm linger with you tonight. Inside the quiet walls of a Roman home, evenings often carried a special rhythm. After the work of the day was done, the family gathered in shared spaces, seeking small joys together. For children, this often meant games played on the floor, where laughter could rise softly without disturbing the night outside. These games were not complicated, but their simplicity gave them a timeless quality. One of the most beloved pastimes involved tossing small objects, shaped like knucklebones, into the air and catching them with practiced skill. The sound of these pieces landing gently on stone floors was like a familiar melody, one that comforted both players and onlookers alike. The knucklebone game, though humble, held layers of charm. Children practiced tossing higher and catching more at once, testing their balance and reflexes in playful competition. Parents sometimes joined, their movements slower but filled with patience, guiding little hands with encouraging smiles. Unlike the games of politics or war that history often remembers, these were moments of intimacy, moments that belonged not to the empire, but to the home. In the glow of a simple oil lamp, a Roman family found joy in these small, steady rhythms. Another beloved form of leisure was board games. These were not elaborate or carved from precious materials for most families, but instead scratched into wood or stone. Patterns of lines and squares created paths for small counters, usually made from pebbles, shells, or bits of bone. Players took turns moving their pieces across the board, each decision carrying a quiet weight. The game was never rushed. Instead, it unfolded like a calm conversation, where pauses were as important as the moves themselves. It was both competition and companionship, woven gently together. Imagine the scene. Two players leaning forward, their eyes fixed on the board, while others watched from nearby benches. The room was filled not with shouting or clamor, but with soft murmurs of thought. A smile here, a chuckle there, the sound of strategy blending with warmth. For the Romans, such games were not only diversions, but lessons in patience, in planning, and in accepting both victory and defeat with grace. In this way, a simple board, carved into stone centuries ago, carried wisdom that still speaks quietly to us today. Children often improvised when toys were scarce. A piece of wood might become a spinning top, while a round fruit could serve as a ball for tossing. Even the most ordinary objects could be reshaped into instruments of fun. What mattered was not the object itself, but the laughter and creativity it inspired. In these acts, we are reminded that play does not require extravagance. It thrives wherever imagination finds space. A Roman child spinning a makeshift toy shares the same spark of joy as children across all of history. The floor of a Roman courtyard sometimes bore scratched lines of past games. Marks etched into the stone told quiet stories of children's competitions that had taken place long before. These faint carvings, though overlooked by passers-by, were legacies of small pleasures, hidden within the fabric of daily life. They remind us that while grand monuments endure in history books, the true essence of life is also found in such humble marks, worn smooth by years of laughter and play. At times, the games were shared between generations. A grandparent might sit nearby, watching with kind eyes, offering advice drawn from memory. Their presence added a calm weight to the gathering, bridging the distance between age and youth. The children played with energy, the elders with patience, and together they created an atmosphere of balance. In this harmony, play was not only about fun, but also about learning how to live among others with kindness and respect. The soundscape of these evenings was gentle. The soft scrape of counters across a board, the faint rattle of knuckle bones tossed into the air. The occasional burst of laughter, all of these created a melody unique to the Roman home. Beyond the walls, the city was vast, alive with noise and bustle. But here, within the household, the rhythm slowed, settling into something more peaceful. The contrast between the outer world and the inner made these moments even more precious. Roman games were not about distraction from life, but about deepening bonds within it. Each move across a board, each shared laugh over a missed catch, was a thread weaving family and friends closer together. These small rituals gave shape to evenings, reminding everyone that life was not only about duty, but also about joy. In a world that could often be harsh, these moments offered lightness, teaching both young and old that rest was as valuable as labor. Even in the grand empire, not all households could afford abundance. Yet games required little, and that was part of their beauty. With only stones, bones, or scraps of wood, entire evenings could be filled with amusement. There was no barrier of wealth in these pastimes, no need for riches to spark laughter. The universality of play was one of Rome's quiet treasures, shared by rich and poor alike, proving that the simplest things often carry the greatest power to bring hearts together. Over time, Roman games began to reflect the flow of life itself. children learned that every move carried a consequence, just as in the larger world beyond the courtyard. Each victory was celebrated softly, with a smile or a laugh, while each loss was accepted as part of the rhythm of play. The lessons were gentle, yet lasting lessons of patience, resilience, and fairness. For a parent watching nearby, these games were more than amusement. They were training grounds for character, teaching children how to carry themselves with dignity. In households where several families lived under one roof, evenings could become gatherings of many voices. Children clustered together in corners, inventing new games, while adults played their own contests on boards etched into stone benches. The hum of conversation and laughter intertwined, filling the air with warmth. The games were not merely entertainment. They were a language of connection, a way to bridge the spaces between neighbors. Just as history is shaped by great events, so too is it held together by such simple evenings of togetherness. The beauty of these games lay not only in their form, but in their ability to endure. Even when pieces were lost, new ones could be carved or found with ease. A smooth pebble from the street could replace a missing counter, and the game continued as if nothing had been interrupted. This resilience speaks to the heart of Roman leisure, that play was not fragile, but adaptable, ready to bloom in any setting. And so, centuries later, archaeologists still find traces of these games etched into the very stones of the empire. Consider the atmosphere of a Roman courtyard under starlight. Shadows stretch long across the ground, the night air cooling after the heat of the day. A child tosses a knucklebone, watching it glimmer in the lamplight before catching it again. Around the table, adults lean close to a board game, their eyes intent, yet their voices soft and steady. This combination of concentration and calm created an evening that was both lively and peaceful. It was in such moments that Romans felt the gentle balance between effort and ease. In many ways, these games remind us that the past is never truly gone. The laughter of Roman children playing with knucklebones echoes in the laughter of children today, tossing a ball or rolling dice. The concentration of Roman adults over their carved boards mirrors the focus of modern families gathered around a puzzle or a chessboard. Though centuries divide us, the core of leisure, the joy of play, the comfort of company remains unbroken. History becomes less distant when we see ourselves reflected in its simplest acts. The end of the evening came quietly, just as it does for us now. Games were set aside, pieces returned to jars or boxes, and the household prepared for rest. Children were guided to their beds, while adults lingered for a final word or thought. The room, once alive with movement, grew still, holding only the faint glow of the lamp. In that calm, the games left behind their purpose, not merely amusement, but a reminder that joy can be found in the smallest of moments, even after the longest of days. And so we close our visit to the Roman home, where games wove laughter into the fabric of family life. We have listened to the clatter of knucklebones, traced the lines of ancient boards, and felt the warmth of simple company. These were not grand spectacles, but quiet rituals that gave ordinary people comfort and delight. As we let these images settle, we can carry with us the truth that fun, in any age, is often found not in extravagance, but in simplicity. If you have found calm in this journey, I invite you gently to subscribe, so you may return whenever a new story is ready. Your presence here helps keep these peaceful explorations alive, offering you more nights of soft history to ease into rest. No need for hurry, just know that this space will be here, waiting quietly for you. In our next video, we will step away from Rome and enter another ancient world. Together, we will explore a question often asked with curiosity. Why did the ancient Egyptians bury their pharaohs with so much stuff? It will be another calm story, filled not with noise, but with the soft unraveling of history's mysteries. Until then, may the quiet of Rome's simple games stay with you, guiding you gently toward rest tonight. When we leave the quiet of a Roman home and step into the city, our path leads naturally toward the Forum. The Forum was not only the center of government or trade, as history often teaches, but also a place where ordinary people found rhythm in their lives. Imagine entering through tall arches, your footsteps echoing against stone as the morning sunlight filters down between columns. The space is vast, yet filled with movement, vendors arranging goods, children weaving through crowds, elders finding shaded spots to sit and watch. It was here, amid the bustle, that Romans found one of their simplest forms of leisure, the pleasure of being among others. For many, the Forum was not a place of business at all, but a kind of open-air living room for the city. People came simply to meet friends, exchange greetings, or share stories. A conversation might begin with news of the harvest, drift toward family matters, and end in shared laughter over a remembered tale. The Forum gave them an excuse to gather without need for invitation. In this way, it functioned much like a park or square does today, a space where the joy of community could unfold naturally. As you picture the Forum, notice the small details. The stone paving beneath your feet has been worn smooth by countless footsteps. The columns that rise above are not silent. They frame the voices of vendors, speakers, and friends greeting one another. Market stalls stand nearby, baskets of figs, olives, and bread tempting passers-by, their scents blending with the warm air. Yet beyond the commerce, there is a hum of casual conversation. This constant murmur formed the background music of the Forum, a soundscape both ordinary and comforting. Some people visited the Forum not to buy or sell, but simply to watch. They found quiet entertainment in observing the flow of life. A traveler unloading his goods, a group of children chasing each other across the square, a storyteller drawing a small circle of listeners. These small spectacles were enough. Leisure did not always require active participation. Sometimes it was enough to sit on a stone bench, lean against a column, and let the world pass slowly before your eyes. Even the act of strolling through the Forum was a form of amusement. Friends walked side by side, speaking in low voices, pausing to admire a statue or to greet someone they recognized. Couples wandered, children darted in and out, and elders walked with careful steps, their pace slower but their eyes sharp. To walk here was to be seen, but also to see others. The Forum offered Romans the pleasure of belonging to something larger than themselves, the ever-moving flow of city life. It is worth remembering that the Forum was not uniform. Some corners were crowded and noisy, filled with bargaining merchants. Others were quieter, shaded by buildings where conversations drifted in softer tones. People could choose where to spend their time, much as we choose today between busy streets and quiet gardens. Leisure was not bound to one definition. It took shape according to each person's needs, whether that was excitement or peace. In this way, the Forum was both a marketplace and a sanctuary of observation. Imagine a warm afternoon when the sun falls at just the right angle to cast long shadows across the square. The stone seems almost golden, and the voices of the crowd rise and fall like gentle waves. In one corner, a musician plucks a simple melody on a lyre, drawing smiles from those who pass. Children pause in their games to listen, before darting off again. These brief, fleeting moments added texture to the Forum, turning it into more than a civic space. Sit was a stage for life's quiet performances. The forum also held storytellers. They spoke not of politics, but of local tales, legends, or light-hearted anecdotes. Their voices rose with animation, their hands gesturing in rhythm, while listeners gathered in loose circles, some standing, others sitting cross-legged on the ground. The joy was not only in the story itself, but in the shared act of listening. Strangers stood shoulder to shoulder, united for a few minutes by the spell of a tale well told. In this way, leisure and culture blended seamlessly. Not all entertainment here came from performers. Much of it came from the crowd itself. To sit quietly and notice the details was to witness an endless stream of small stories. A merchant haggling, a boy tripping and laughing, a group of women carrying baskets with practiced balance. These moments may have seemed ordinary, yet they gave texture to the Roman day. Leisure could be as simple as finding joy in the observation of others, letting curiosity guide the eyes while the body remained still. The forum at dusk carried a different atmosphere altogether. As the day's work slowed, stalls closed, and voices softened, a more reflective mood descended. The glow of torches replaced the sun, and the stone columns cast long shadows across the square. Those who lingered found peace in the shifting light, in the cooler air, and in the gentle rhythm of footsteps heading home. Leisure was not only the noise of daytime gatherings, it was also this quiet transformation when the city seemed to sigh and prepare for rest. At night, the forum did not fall completely silent. Some citizens preferred the cooler evening hours for their strolls, especially during the warm months. Torches flickered along the pathways, their light dancing on stone surfaces, creating shifting patterns that seemed alive. Small groups lingered, voices lowered, sharing thoughts too personal for the busy hours of day. In this way, the forum became not just a place of trade and politics, but of whispered confidences, of stories told beneath the stars, carried softly into the quiet air. The architecture itself gave the forum an atmosphere of wonder. Tall columns lined the open space, each one a reminder of the city's strength. But for the ordinary visitor, these columns were not symbols of power, but simple guardians of shade and shelter. A weary traveler might rest against one, enjoying the cool stone against their back. Children might trace their hands along its grooves, turning the monumental into something familiar and playful. The grand structures of Rome became part of everyday leisure, lived in quietly rather than admired from afar. Birds also found their place here. In the early mornings and late afternoons, flocks swooped across the open square, their wings flashing in the sun. Romans often paused to watch them, their movements a reminder of nature weaving through the heart of the city. A hawk gliding overhead, sparrows darting near stalls. These scenes offered a moment of calm observation. Leisure was not always man-made. Sometimes it came uninvited, delivered by the natural world that shared the same space. Even the fountains added their voice to the forum. Water trickled gently into stone basins, its sound mingling with the hum of the crowd. For many, this background music was soothing, a constant reminder of refreshment available to all. Travelers paused to drink, children splashed with playful hands, and elders sat nearby, enjoying the coolness the water brought. Such small details made the forum not only functional, but welcoming. Leisure often arose from these interactions with simple blessings of creation, offered freely for comfort and rest. One could spend hours in the forum without any purpose beyond wandering. There was always something to see, always a chance to greet someone or to hear a piece of news. Even those who came alone found company in the movement around them. The forum embraced solitude and society alike, offering space for both. It was, in essence, the heartbeat of Rome, where the individual and the community met in harmony. As the day closed, many found pleasure in watching the transition from light to shadow. The slow sinking of the sun across the rooftops, the way golden light stretched across marble, the hush that fell as shops closed. These changes created a quiet show, one that repeated every evening yet never lost its charm. Leisure could be found in the simple act of noticing, in allowing the senses to rest upon the world as it shifted gently toward night. The forum also served as a mirror keeper. Generations of footsteps wore the stones smooth, each layer of sound and presence becoming part of its history. To sit there was to feel connected, not only to those nearby, but to all who had walked there before. Leisure was thus a link to the past, a quiet recognition that one was part of a story much larger than themselves. This awareness, though subtle, brought comfort, as if the square itself cradled the lives of its people. Travelers from distant regions also wandered the forum. They brought with them accents, clothing, and customs unfamiliar to the locals. For Romans, seeing these visitors could itself be a form of entertainment, a glimpse into lands far beyond their own. Stories exchanged with strangers enriched the square with variety, adding color to its daily rhythm. Leisure here was not only about familiarity, but also about discovery, the quiet wonder of encountering something new. By the time the final torches dimmed, the forum lay under the watch of the night sky. The stars above, ancient and unchanging, cast their quiet light upon the emptying square. Those who lingered took their last steps slowly, reluctant to leave behind the comfort of its atmosphere. Leisure, in these final moments, was simply the act of existing in stillness, feeling the vastness of the world above and the solid ground beneath. Rome slept, but its forum remained a silent witness, ready to awaken again with the dawn. And so, the forum was not merely a place of law or trade, but a stage where daily life unfolded. Its pleasures were subtle: a walk, a conversation, the sound of water, the flight of birds, the warmth of community. These were the quiet entertainments of Romans, as ordinary as they were profound. In the forum, leisure was not a separate pursuit, but part of living itself, woven into each step, each sound, each glance. To remember it now is to understand that even in the grandest of cities, joy was found in the simplest of ways. The Roman bathhouse was far more than a place to wash. To step inside was to enter a different rhythm of life, one that blended rest, conversation, and the slow rituals of care. Picture the wide doorway opening into halls of stone, where warm air carried a faint mist. Citizens of every background made their way here, not only to cleanse the body, but also to soothe the mind. The bathhouse was a place where the noise of the outside world fell away, replaced with the steady flow of water and the low hum of voices. For many Romans, a visit to the baths was part of the day's structure. Just as one might pause now to walk in a park or share a cup of tea, Romans paused to enter this shared space of renewal. Some came after hours of labor, their muscles tired, their clothes dusty, seeking relief in warmth and water. Others came simply to see friends, to talk of the day's events, or to sit quietly. In every case, the bathhouse offered more than cleansing it, offered a kind of pause, a space between the demands of life. Imagine stepping onto cool stone floors, your footsteps echoing softly as you move through the chambers. First, there is the frigidarium, a room of cold water, where the body awakens with a sudden, sharp freshness. Beyond lies the tepidarium, where the water is warm, not hot, inviting one to linger in comfort. Finally, the caldarium awaits, its heat wrapping around the body like a heavy blanket. Each room carried its own mood, its own rhythm, together forming a journey through sensation and rest. The soundscape of the baths was gentle and layered. Water poured steadily into pools, voices rose and fell in easy conversation, and occasionally laughter echoed against the walls. These were not the sounds of spectacle or celebration, but of daily life unfolding in a calm, communal rhythm. For some, the baths were a place to meet acquaintances. For others, they were a place of solitude, where one could close the eyes and let warmth settle deep into the body. Each visitor carried their own reason for being there, yet all shared the same space in quiet harmony. Even the architecture encouraged rest. High ceilings allowed the warm air to rise, while narrow windows softened the light as it entered. The walls were often painted with calm colors, simple patterns, or faded scenes from stories long known. To sit within such a room was to feel surrounded by care, as if the very stones were designed to ease the spirit. The baths became not only practical, but beautiful in their own gentle way. They reminded the visitor that rest itself could be art. Around the pools, people gathered without hurry. Some reclined along the edges, speaking in low voices, while others moved slowly through the water. It was not unusual to see neighbors, co-workers, or travelers side by side, the bathhouse blurring the lines of social difference. In this place, conversation could flow easily, from the smallest detail of daily life to the retelling of stories and memories. Leisure was found not only in the water itself, but in these exchanges, soft threads of connection woven quietly into the day. Children, too, sometimes accompanied their parents, splashing gently in shallower pools. Their laughter carried a brightness into the atmosphere, reminding all who listened that leisure was as much about joy as it was about rest. Elders might watch from nearby benches, smiling faintly, their eyes softened by the sight of youth. The bathhouse was therefore not only a place for individuals, but for generations, each finding comfort in their own way. Together, they formed a living portrait of Roman life at ease. Vendors often lingered near the entrances, offering small items to complete the experience. Oil for the skin, combs for the hair, or simple cloths for drying could be purchased, adding to the ritual. These were not extravagances, but everyday tools that turned the visit into a complete cycle of refreshment. A Roman leaving the bathhouse stepped back into the city not only cleaner, but calmer, their body and spirit given a chance to reset. It was a rhythm that repeated day after day, grounding life with balance. The baths also offered spaces for quiet thought. In corners, some sat alone, eyes closed, listening to the steady drip of water. For them, leisure meant not conversation, but stillness, letting the world fall away for a while. In those moments, the bathhouse became almost timeless, a place where hours could pass unnoticed. The steady warmth, the dim light, the familiar echo of voices all blended together into a background that lulled the mind toward peace. To imagine such a place now is to sense its dual nature. The baths were communal, filled with the voices and presence of others. Yet they also offered solitude, a chance to retreat inward. This balance made them unique, neither fully private nor fully public, but something in between. In them, Romans discovered not only the relief of water, but the deeper comfort of belonging to oneself, to others, and to the rhythm of life itself. It was leisure shaped into a shared experience, steady and enduring. As the day's heat softened, the bathhouse became a shelter for weary bodies. Workers returned from fields or workshops, carrying the dust of labor upon their skin. Soldiers, too, found comfort here, setting aside armor and weapons for the embrace of warm water. Within these walls, all roles of the outside world faded. A laborer and a merchant might sit side by side, equal in their desire for rest. The baths offered a rare balance, where the shared human need for relief overcame the divisions of status. The act of bathing was often accompanied by the use of oil, rubbed gently onto the skin before being scraped away with a curved tool called a strigil. This was not done for vanity, but for health and comfort, removing the dust and sweat of the day. The scrape of the strigil across the skin, followed by the soothing touch of water, created a ritual that was both physical and calming. In this, Romans found not only cleanliness, but also the satisfaction of relaxity, letting go of weight, both seen and unseen. In the tepidarium, where water was pleasantly warm, conversations often lingered. The atmosphere was perfect for dialogue, not too hot to overwhelm, not too cold to shorten the visit. Friends spoke of harvests, of journeys, of children, or of simple observations about the weather. Nothing urgent, nothing heavy, just words carried gently between them, filling the air with a steady hum. In these moments, the bathhouse resembled a community hall, not designed for spectacle, but for connection. The caldarium, however, was a different world. Steam rose thickly, clinging to the skin, wrapping the body in heavy warmth. Breathing slowed here, the chest rising and falling in deliberate rhythm. Some sat silently, letting the heat seep into their muscles, while others leaned back, eyes half closed, drifting toward a state between waking and sleep. Leisure in the caldarium was not about conversation, but about surrender, allowing the body to rest without resistance, embraced by the weight of the air itself. When one had moved through each chamber, from cold to warm to hot, and perhaps back again, the cycle of bathing felt complete. The body tingled, refreshed, yet heavy with calm, as if it had been unburdened of the day's demands. To step outside afterward was to carry a renewed stillness, a rhythm slower than before. The bathhouse was not simply a building, it was an experience, a journey through sensation and companionship, designed to draw out the softer side of life. Around the baths, open courtyards often provided places to linger. Here, some stretched their limbs, others shared small snacks, and still others simply sat in silence. Birds nested in the eaves, their calls mixing with the murmurs of people, creating a natural harmony. For those who stayed after bathing, the courtyard offered a final pause before returning to the world beyond. Leisure did not end with the water rite, extended into these moments of still reflection. In larger bathhouses, small libraries or gardens were attached, expanding the possibilities of rest. After bathing, one might stroll among plants, listening to the rustle of leaves and the trickle of fountains. Others might read quietly, their minds as refreshed as their bodies. These additions showed that leisure was not bound to a single activity, but could flow across many forms, each one feeding the other. Rest of the body encouraged rest of the mind, and rest of the mind encouraged gentleness in return. Evenings at the bathhouse carried a special calm. As lamps were lit, their glow reflected softly on the water's surface, creating ripples of light across the walls. Voices lowered, footsteps slowed, and the pace of the place shifted toward closure. Those who lingered longest often found themselves wrapped in a deeper quiet, the kind that settles into the heart and stays. To leave at such an hour was to step into the night, carrying not only cleanliness, but serenity. The baths, in their way, mirrored life itself. moving from cold to warm, from solitude to company, from energy to rest. They offered a cycle that reflected the human journey. To participate was to acknowledge the need for balance, for both effort and ease. In this rhythm, Romans discovered not only physical refreshment, but also a philosophy of leisure. That leisure was not wasted time, but necessary time, shaping the body and mind for the days to come. And so, the bathhouse was more than a structure of stone and water. It was a meeting point of community, of conversation, of healing, and of calm. Its pools and chambers provided the stage for countless small stories, moments of laughter, of reflection, of shared humanity. When we think of Roman leisure, the bathhouse stands as one of its clearest images, not because of grandeur, but because of its quiet promise, a place where life could pause, where people could breathe, and where time itself seemed to slow. When the sun dipped behind the rooftops and the city began to soften, Romans often turned to quieter pleasures. Among the most cherished were evenings of music and poetry, moments that allowed the mind to wander and the heart to rest. These gatherings did not always take place in grand halls. More often, they unfolded in homes, courtyards, or small shaded gardens. There, people sat together, listening not for spectacle, but for calm. The sound of a simple instrument or the measured rhythm of verse was enough to turn an ordinary evening into something memorable. Music in Rome came in many forms. The gentle notes of the flute, the soft strumming of a lyre, and the steady beat of handheld drums created soundscapes that carried lightly through the air. Unlike the thunder of large public events, these melodies were intimate, designed to soothe rather than stir. A single musician might play while others reclined nearby, their eyes closed, letting the tones flow over them. Leisure in this form was not about noise, but about quiet resonance, where sound blended with silence. Poetry was equally beloved. Romans admired the art of words shaped with care, spoken slowly so that each syllable lingered. A recitation could be humorous, thoughtful, or reflective, yet always delivered with a rhythm that invited stillness. Listeners leaned forward, catching the rise and fall of the voice, allowing the words to paint images in the mind. These were not hurried speeches, but meditations, designed to stretch time and give the listener space to imagine. The leisure of poetry lay not only in its content, but in its pacing, which allowed life to slow. Picture a small group gathered around a lamplit table. One person holds a scroll, reading aloud with deliberate care, while others listen in silence. Occasionally, a murmur of agreement passes, or a soft laugh escapes, but mostly the room is filled with the gentle cadence of words. The audience is not restless. They are absorbed, their breathing aligned with the rhythm of the recitation. In this way, poetry created not only entertainment, but a shared atmosphere, a space where hearts and minds could meet without effort. These evenings were often accompanied by simple comforts. A tray of fruit, perhaps figs or grapes, was passed quietly among the listeners. A jug of water or diluted wine sat nearby, offered not as indulgence, but as refreshment. The setting was unassuming, yet it carried a weight of intimacy. The combination of sound, taste, and companionship made the experience whole. It was not the grandeur of wealth that made these evenings meaningful, but their ability to weave small pleasures into something lasting. Music and poetry alike were threads that tied people to one another. A song played on a flute might remind one listener of childhood, while a line of verse might spark a memory for another. Sharing these feelings within a group deepened bonds, turning strangers into friends and friends into companions of thought. Leisure in this sense was not passive, it was active in its quiet way, inviting reflection, empathy, and connection. Such evenings proved that art, even in its simplest form, could bring souls closer together. In larger gatherings, performances sometimes alternated between music and poetry. A musician would play a gentle melody, allowing the audience to sink into calm, followed by a poet reciting lines that carried the mind in a different direction. This rhythm of sound and word created balance, giving variety without breaking the mood. Each element supported the other, like two voices in harmony. The result was an evening that flowed naturally, its beauty lying in the softness of its transitions. The instruments themselves carried their own stories. A lyre, for instance, was often handmade, its strings producing tones both delicate and rich. The flute, carved from reed or bone, offered a voice that was both human and otherworldly in its breathy tone. To play these instruments was not merely to produce sound, but to guide emotion, to shape the space of the evening. In the hands of skilled players, they became tools of calm, soothing the minds of those who listened. The voices of poets, too, held power. The careful pacing, the pauses between lines, the emphasis on certain words, turned language into music of its own kind. Listeners were drawn not only by the meaning of the words, but by the manner in which they were delivered. A slow recitation could feel like a lullaby, coaxing the mind into gentler states. In this way, poetry and music shared the same purpose: to quiet the noise of daily life and replace it with measured sound. Evenings like these often ended without applause or ceremony. Instead, there was a simple moment of silence when the final note faded or the last line was spoken. People breathed quietly, as if reluctant to break the spell, before slowly beginning to speak again. The return to ordinary conversation was unhurried, as though each person carried a piece of the performance within them. Leisure in these gatherings was not about climax, but about lingering, leaving behind echoes that followed the listener into the night. For some Romans, music and poetry were not only entertainment, but also education. A line of verse could carry a lesson, reminding listeners of history, nature, or the passing of time. A melody could inspire reflection, urging the mind toward thoughts it might not have found alone. In this way, leisure blended with learning, though never in a harsh or demanding way. The knowledge arrived softly, folded into the beauty of sound and rhythm, making it easier to remember. Travelers often carried songs and stories with them, spreading them from one place to another. A tune played in a quiet Roman courtyard might have its roots in distant lands, brought by a visitor who learned it long ago. Listeners did not always know the origin, yet they welcomed it all the same, appreciating the freshness it brought. In this way, music and poetry became bridges, connecting Rome to other cultures without the need for maps or journeys. Leisure expanded the boundaries of experience, carried on the notes of a flute or the lines of a poem. In rural areas, gatherings were smaller but no less meaningful. Villagers sat together outdoors, the night air filled with the scent of earth and plants, while simple songs drifted into the darkness. A single voice might rise, untrained but steady, carrying words that everyone knew by heart. Others joined in quietly until the melody belonged to all, blending seamlessly into the sounds of crickets and rustling leaves. Here, leisure was part of nature itself, woven into the environment, inseparable from the world around. Within cities, poets sometimes found patrons who invited them to perform in more elaborate settings. These occasions might include decorated rooms, larger audiences, and more polished delivery. Yet even in such contexts, the core remained the same: words given form, and listeners carried gently along by their flow. Wealth and setting might change the scale, but not the essence. The heart of the gathering was always the connection between voice and ear, between the poet and those who allowed themselves to listen. The effect of these evenings often lingered long after they ended. A melody might hum in the back of the mind while walking home, repeating softly with each step. A line of poetry might surface days later, its meaning renewed with each recall. These remnants of sound and word acted like companions, staying with the listener in quiet moments. Leisure did not end with the performance, it traveled forward, shaping thought and mood in ways both subtle and lasting. Children, too, were shaped by these gatherings. Sitting at their parents' side, they absorbed the rhythms of verse and the tones of music without realizing. The stories and melodies became part of their memory, resurfacing later in life as familiar comforts. Through this quiet exposure, they inherited not only entertainment, but culture itself, carried forward by repetition and remembrance. Leisure in this sense was also a gift to the future, passed down gently from one generation to the next. The beauty of these evenings lay in their accessibility. One did not need wealth or status to listen, only willingness to pause. A song played on a modest flute, a poem read from a worn scroll. These were treasures available to many. The power of leisure here was in its humility, its ability to reach anyone willing to listen. It reminds us that the most lasting forms of enjoyment are often the simplest, untouched by grandeur or excess. As the night deepened, gatherings would slowly disperse. Friends offered final words, children rubbed their eyes with drowsiness, and musicians packed away their instruments. The household or courtyard grew quiet again, its echoes of music and poetry fading into stillness. Yet in that stillness remained a sense of fullness, as though the air itself carried the memory of what had been shared. Leisure ended not with emptiness, but with a gentle afterglow that promised rest. To think of these Roman evenings now is to see them as timeless. Across centuries, humans have always found comfort in sound, whether through instruments, song, or the spoken word. We still gather, we still listen, we still allow music and poetry to guide us into calm. The Romans, in their own way, were simply continuing a practice as old as humanity itself. Leisure was not invention, but tradition, renewed each time someone lifted a voice or strummed a string. Thus, music and poetry evenings were among the quiet jewels of Roman life. They did not shape empires or change the course of wars, but they shaped evenings, hearts, and memories. They offered peace to those who listened, connection to those who shared, and beauty to anyone willing to pause. In the end, their value lay not in their scale, but in their softness. And as we drift from this part of the Roman world, we carry with us the same truth, that simple art, shared in stillness, has always been one of humanity's purest forms of rest. Storytelling has always been one of humanity's oldest forms of leisure. In ancient Rome, it carried a special place in both public and private life. While some stories were written on scrolls, many were carried only in memory, spoken aloud by skilled voices who knew how to capture an audience. These gatherings could happen anywhere, around the warmth of a household lamp, in a small courtyard filled with neighbors, or in a modest public square. What mattered most was not the setting, but the act of listening together, letting words shape the imagination. The Roman taste for storytelling included many kinds of tales. Some were drawn from history, retelling the lives of past leaders or describing battles long finished. Others were lighter, filled with humor, jokes, or playful exaggerations. A storyteller's gift lay in their ability to make the familiar new, to draw listeners into a world they already knew, but with fresh color and rhythm. Leisure here was less about the content than about the shared experience of hearing it unfold. Children, of course, were among the most eager listeners. Their eyes widened at dramatic pauses, their laughter rang out at sudden twists, and their curiosity spilled into questions even before the story ended. For them, stories were both amusement and learning, teaching lessons hidden within playful plots. Adults, too, leaned in, enjoying the chance to leave behind the weight of the day. A simple story became a bridge between ages, binding families and communities together with imagination. Theatre provided another outlet for this love of story. In Rome, theatres were not always vast and crowded. Many were modest, designed to hold smaller groups. Here, actors performed tales both serious and comic, dressed in simple costumes, their gestures exaggerated, so even the farthest listener could follow. The air was filled not with silence, but with the gentle murmur of an audience responding together, chuckling, sighing, or whispering comments to their neighbors. It was leisure woven into performance, as much about the gathering as the play itself. Puppetry, too, found its place among Roman amusements. Traveling performers carried small wooden figures, painted with care, and brought them to life through movement and voice. Children delighted in these shows, but adults were not immune to their charm. The combination of humor, craft, and illusion sparked joy across generations. In its own way, puppetry carried the same function as grander theatre. It reminded people of the power of imagination, the pleasure of watching the ordinary become extraordinary. Storytelling also moved with travelers. A performer might journey from town to town, carrying only a voice, a few props, and a mind full of tales. In each new place, they gathered a fresh audience, repeating old stories or adapting them to suit local tastes. This mobility ensured that culture spread widely, not through books alone, but through spoken word and memory. Leisure, in this form, was portable, needing no structure beyond people willing to listen. For many, the greatest joy lay in the rhythm of the voice itself. A skilled storyteller knew how to rise and fall, how to pause at the right moment, how to stretch silence into suspense. Even when the story was well known, the delivery made it feel alive again. The sound of language became music, filling the ears with patterns that soothed as much as they entertained. Leisure was as much about sound as about meaning, reminding listeners of the beauty hidden in ordinary speech. Theatre, when performed outdoors, carried a special charm. The setting sun served as backdrop, its light softening as the performance unfolded. The air cooled, carrying the voices across open space, while the audience gathered on benches or even stood in clusters. These events blurred the line between performance and daily life, the stage and the world around it merging into one. Leisure here was not enclosed or exclusive, but open, shared by anyone willing to pause and watch. Some plays were comedies, designed to draw laughter from the crowd. Actors used exaggerated movements, playful disguises, and familiar jokes to spark joy. The laughter spread easily, rolling across the audience in waves, uniting strangers in the same moment of amusement. Other plays carried more serious themes, though even these were softened by the communal setting, making them less heavy and more reflective. Whatever the tone, theatre gave Romans a way to see themselves mirrored in story, to laugh at their own habits, or to think gently about life. In the end, whether told by a single voice in a courtyard or performed by actors on a stage, Roman storytelling was about connection. It connected past to present, performer to audience, child to parent, stranger to stranger. It turned words into threads, weaving people together in the act of listening. Leisure in Rome was never just about passing time. It was about finding meaning in the act of sharing. Through stories, Romans discovered not only amusement, but also the comfort of knowing they belonged to something larger than themselves. As night deepened, storytelling often moved into more intimate settings. Families gathered in courtyards, where the stars provided their own silent backdrop. A parent or elder would take the role of storyteller, while children leaned close, their eyes reflecting the glow of the oil lamp. These evenings were quiet, without spectacle or performance, yet they carried a depth of meaning that lingered. Leisure in this form was not only about tales, but about presence, the warmth of voices filling the night. Travelers along Roman roads also relied on stories for company. Sitting beside campfires, they exchanged accounts of places visited, people met, or strange events along the journey. These were not polished performances, but raw memories shared in simple language. For those who listened, they were as valuable as entertainment, easing the solitude of travel and turning strangers into companions. Even here, leisure softened the weight of distance, giving shape to nights that might otherwise have been long and silent. In villages, the arrival of a storyteller was often an event. Word spread quickly, and soon neighbors gathered in squares or by temples to hear the tales unfold. The atmosphere was one of quiet anticipation, with listeners ready to surrender their attention to whatever the voice would bring. These communal gatherings not only entertained, but also reinforced bonds within the community. To laugh, sigh, or reflect together was to affirm a sense of belonging, a gentle reminder of shared life. The artistry of theatre grew from these roots. While large amphitheatres would later host massive crowds, the smaller performances retained a special intimacy. Audiences could see the actors' expressions, hear the subtle shifts in their voices, and feel the immediacy of the moment. The connection between performer and spectator was closer here, reminding both that theatre, at its core, was about human contact. In this closeness, leisure became something deeply personal. For children, puppet shows held endless fascination. The movement of wooden figures, simple though it was, carried a kind of magic. A tiny gesture could become a story. A small voice could hold an audience. These shows did not require grandeur. Their power lay in transformation, the ordinary becoming alive in front of watchful eyes. Leisure for children was as much about wonder as amusement, and puppet shows delivered both in abundance. Poetry readings were sometimes incorporated into theatre, blending word and performance. An actor might step forward, scroll in hand, and recite lines that shifted the audience from laughter to reflection. These moments slowed the pace, encouraging listeners to breathe with the rhythm of the verse. The blending of forms, comedy, drama, poetry gave Roman theatre its variety, ensuring that each gathering offered something for everyone. Leisure was never one shape. It was many, layered together like voices in a chorus. The power of storytelling lay in its adaptability. A tale could be expanded for a large crowd or whispered softly to a single listener. It could bring laughter, wisdom, or even comfort in times of difficulty. In every case, it gave people a way to step outside themselves, to imagine worlds beyond their own. Leisure here was not escape, but expansion, stretching the mind gently into new shapes, broadening the heart without strain. As the final words of a story drifted into silence, there was often a pause before anyone spoke. Listeners sat with their thoughts, letting the images settle in their minds. This quiet was as much a part of the experience as the tale itself, a natural conclusion that honored what had just been shared. It was in this silence that leisure revealed its deepest truth, that stillness and reflection are as valuable as sound. When the gatherings finally broke apart, people carried the stories with them. A line remembered, a scene replayed, a character imagined. All these lingered beyond the moment. The next day, neighbors might recount parts of the tale to each other, ensuring it lived on in memory. Storytelling was not confined to its performance. It echoed outward, extending leisure into daily life. The joy of listening became the joy of retelling, spreading gently from person to person. Thus, storytelling and theatre were never just diversions in Rome. They were mirrors reflecting society, bridges linking generations, and threads binding communities. Through them, Romans found laughter, reflection, and above all, connection. Leisure in these forms was not fleeting. It was enduring, carried forward in memory and shared again in countless voices. As we picture these quiet evenings, we see how the simple act of telling a story has always been one of humanity's greatest comforts, guiding hearts gently toward peace. Beyond the stone streets and busy marketplaces of Rome, another kind of leisure awaited. For those who longed for quiet, the countryside offered a slower rhythm, a chance to breathe freely beneath open skies. Wealthier Romans sometimes retreated to villas surrounded by gardens, while ordinary families might visit fields or small groves nearby. The countryside became a counterbalance to the noise of the city, reminding people that rest was not only found among walls and columns, but also beneath trees and clouds. Imagine walking through a Roman villa garden at dusk. Pathways lined with gravel crunch beneath your feet, while vines climb along shaded walls. Fountains trickle steadily into stone basins, their water reflecting the fading light. The air is scented with herbs, rosemary, thyme, and lavender, planted not only for use in cooking, but also for their calming fragrance. To wander here was to feel wrapped in a softer world, one where time seemed to slow with each step. Leisure in these gardens was as much about stillness as it was about movement. Even for those without villas, nature remained a refuge. Farmers, after long hours of labor, found peace sitting by their fields, watching the horizon stretch into twilight. Children played among olive groves, climbing low branches or gathering fallen fruit, their laughter carrying through the leaves. Travelers rested by streams, listening to the water's flow and feeling its coolness on tired hands. These simple moments of connection with the natural world reminded Romans that beauty was not confined to the city, it was spread across the land itself. The countryside also carried the rhythm of animals. Shepherds guided their flocks across hillsides, the sound of bells ringing softly as sheep grazed. Birds darted through fields, their songs mingling with the hum of insects in the summer air. Leisure could be found in pausing to notice these patterns, to observe the harmony between people, animals, and earth. It was not entertainment in the sense of performance, but a kind of quiet companionship with the natural world, offered freely to anyone willing to see it. In gardens designed with care, Romans planted rows of trees that offered both shade and beauty. Olive, fig, and cypress trees lined the edges of walkways, their shapes creating patterns against the sky. Beneath them, benches invited visitors to sit and reflect, to speak softly with friends, or simply to listen to the rustle of leaves. These gardens were not grand spectacles, but living sanctuaries, where the gift of rest flowed directly from creation. Leisure here meant not doing, but being, allowing the senses to absorb peace without effort. For poets and thinkers, the countryside provided inspiration. A quiet grove became a place to compose verses, while the sight of mountains in the distance stirred reflections on time and change. Even ordinary Romans, untrained in art, felt their thoughts soften in such places. The stillness of the landscape encouraged reflection, as if nature itself invited the mind to slow. Leisure here was not about filling the hours, but about letting them pass gently, unmeasured, as the world carried on its quiet cycles. Festivals sometimes extended into rural settings, blending community with nature. Families gathered in open fields, laying out simple meals and sharing laughter beneath the open sky. Music might drift lightly across the grass, carried on the wind, while children ran freely in the wide spaces. These gatherings were not elaborate. They did not require marble halls or decorated stages. Their joy came from the openness of the earth itself, reminding everyone that leisure could be as vast as the horizon. Travelers spoke often of the refreshment found in country air. After the crowded streets of the city, with their constant noise and movement, the countryside felt like a release. The silence between sounds was wider, the nights darker and filled with more stars, the mornings clearer and filled with birdsong. Leisure in this setting was not only physical, but also emotional, giving the spirit space to expand. To spend even a day away from the city was to return with new energy, renewed by the calmness of the land. Children found endless play in natural spaces. A fallen branch became a sword or a staff in imaginary games, while smooth stones became treasures to be collected. Streams offered places to splash and chase small fish, their laughter echoing off the water. These games were not designed or purchased, they arose naturally, shaped by the environment itself. Leisure for children in the countryside was a kind of discovery, turning every hill, tree, and stream into a stage for adventure. Evenings in the countryside brought their own kind of performance. As the sun sank, the sky turned colors of orange, red, and purple, shifting slowly into the deep blue of night. Families sat together, watching this daily transformation with quiet awe. No words were needed. The spectacle belonged to all, requiring only attention. Leisure here was woven into the very fabric of the earth and sky, a reminder that the greatest shows often came without cost, waiting only for those willing to pause. Nights in the countryside were marked by silence deeper than the city could ever offer. Without the constant voices of crowds or the clatter of carts, the stillness seemed almost alive. Crickets sang in steady rhythm, owls called softly from distant trees, and the stars stretched endlessly above. For Romans accustomed to the hum of urban life, this quiet was a form of leisure all its own. It allowed thoughts to rest, unburdened by noise, as if the very air carried peace into the soul. Farms themselves became spaces of gentle amusement. A family might gather on a porch after the day's labor, sharing bread and fruit while talking quietly. Children listened as elders spoke of seasons past, of harvests remembered, and of lessons carried forward. These were not dramatic stories, but steady reminders of continuity, of life moving in cycles. Leisure here was not about escape, but about belonging to the land, to tradition, to one another. Such evenings affirmed the bond between people and place, a bond strengthened by time and repetition. Streams and rivers also drew Romans seeking rest. The sight of water flowing, steady and unbroken, calmed the mind. People sat along banks, letting the sound wash over them like a soft melody. Some dipped their hands into the cool surface, watching ripples stretch outward in gentle circles. To sit by water was to be reminded of time itself, always moving, always flowing, yet always returning in endless rhythm. Leisure in such places became a meditation, inviting patience and reflection. Seasonal changes brought variety to countryside leisure. In spring, wildflowers spread across meadows, inviting walks and gentle gathering. In summer, shade beneath trees offered relief from the sun, while autumn carried the scent of earth and harvest. Winter nights, though colder, held their own calm, with fires crackling in hearths and families gathered close. Each season shaped the way people rested, offering its own unique kind of peace. For Romans, the countryside was a constant teacher, reminding them that life's rhythms were larger than themselves. Artists sometimes sought inspiration outside the city walls. A painter might carry tools to capture the play of light on fields, while a poet recorded verses inspired by the whisper of trees. Even those who did not create still felt moved by the scenery, carrying its calm back with them in memory. The countryside became not only a place of leisure, but also a source of thought, giving birth to words and images that outlasted the moment. Leisure here was both fleeting and enduring, resting in hearts long after the visit ended. Festive occasions deepened this connection. Rural gatherings often included music, dancing, and shared meals beneath open skies. Children wove flowers into garlands, while adults exchanged stories that carried across generations. These celebrations were not about extravagance, but about unity, reminding everyone present of the joy found in simple companionship. Leisure was magnified by community, proving that togetherness was as refreshing as the countryside air itself. The beauty of the land was not lost on travelers. Those passing through often paused to admire hills rolling into distance, or vineyards spreading in careful rows. A journey slowed by such pauses became less tiring, for the eyes and spirit found nourishment along the way. Romans, like many before and after them, recognized that nature provided not only food and shelter, but also rest for the weary heart. Leisure was thus woven into travel itself, discovered in the act of noticing. At times, temples or shrines stood within rural landscapes, small and unadorned. People visited not only for devotion, but also for quiet reflection, sitting nearby to watch the world move slowly around them. These spaces reminded Romans that even in sacred or solemn places, rest could be found in observation and thought. Leisure here was not noisy or playful, but contemplative, a way of aligning the self with the stillness of the earth. It gave balance to lives often filled with activity. Evenings in the countryside often ended with fires glowing in courtyards or fields. Families sat in circles, their faces lit by the flames, voices rising softly in conversation. The fire provided warmth, but it also gave a center to the gathering, a point around which leisure unfolded. Sparks rose into the night sky, vanishing among the stars, while laughter and gentle talk carried until drowsiness urged people toward rest. Leisure here was not about distraction, but about the comfort of routine, repeated night after night. And so, the countryside gave Romans more than escape from the city, it gave them perspective. In gardens, in fields, by rivers, and under the stars, they found forms of leisure that required no performance and no wealth. Nature offered its gifts freely: calm, beauty, rhythm, and space to breathe. For Romans, these retreats were not luxuries, but necessities, grounding them in something larger than their empire. To remember their countryside evenings now is to remember that rest, wherever it is found, is most often given through the quiet strength of the natural world. Romans found joy not only in quiet gatherings, but also in movement. Leisure often included play, exercise, and simple contests that gave both children and adults a sense of energy and laughter. These activities were not about fame or glory. They were about enjoyment, about keeping the body active and the spirit light. Sports in Rome, especially at the local and family level, carried a sense of fun more than competition, shaping moments that balanced daily work with bursts of play. Children especially loved ball games. A small leather ball was enough to spark hours of amusement, tossed between friends with quick reflexes and cheerful shouts. Sometimes, simple rules guided the play: who could catch the ball fastest, or who could keep it from touching the ground longest. Other times, there were no rules at all, only the joy of movement and the rhythm of passing back and forth. The ball itself mattered little. It was the laughter and energy it inspired that made the game timeless. Adults, too, joined in with their own games. Running contests were common, with participants dashing across open courtyards or fields to see who reached the end first. These races were short and light-hearted, more playful than serious. Friends laughed as they stumbled, encouraged each other as they ran, and celebrated not with prizes, but with smiles and shared breathlessness. The joy was not in victory, but in the shared experience of movement, reminding everyone of the vitality within them. Another favored activity was the discus. A smooth, flat stone or crafted disc was thrown across open space, the challenge being who could send it farthest. Unlike professional athletes in great arenas, these small contests carried no pressure. They were quiet spectacles among friends, who applauded the effort as much as the outcome. Watching a discus arc through the air brought satisfaction in itself, the graceful curve mirroring the simplicity of the game. Leisure here was not about records, but about appreciation of the moment. Children often invented their own forms of sport. A stick became a javelin, a rope, a boundary line, and the simplest patch of open ground transformed into a field of play. Their imaginations shaped the rules, their energy drove the game, and their joy filled the air. Adults sometimes watched with quiet smiles, remembering their own childhood games. In this way, leisure became a cycle, renewed in each generation through the universal language of play. Even within neighborhoods, contests brought people together. Groups gathered in open squares, organizing friendly competitions that anyone could join. There was little formality, no tickets, no grand announcements, only the shared understanding that a game would begin. Spectators sat on steps or leaned against walls, cheering with warmth rather than rivalry. These small gatherings proved that leisure could strengthen community, turning strangers into companions through the simple act of watching and supporting. Sports also encouraged health, though Romans may not have spoken of it in modern terms. Running, throwing, and active play built strength and endurance, keeping bodies agile for daily life. More importantly, these activities lifted spirits, easing the weight of routine and hard work. Leisure through movement was not wasteful, it was restorative, a natural reminder that the body itself was a gift, capable of joy as well as labor. The simplicity of these games meant they could happen anywhere. In courtyards, fields, streets, or gardens, Romans found space for movement. A group of children might chase each other through narrow alleys, while adults organized races outside the city gates. There was no need for elaborate arenas or equipment. Leisure in this form was accessible to all, proving that fun required only people, space, and imagination. At times, contests took on a festive air. During special gatherings or holidays, groups arranged larger games, inviting more participants and drawing larger crowds. These events blended sport with celebration, filling the air with excitement. Yet, even here, the atmosphere remained light, with laughter outweighing rivalry. Victories were applauded, but friendships endured beyond the outcome. Leisure through sport reminded Romans that unity was more important than triumph. The beauty of Roman play lay in its flexibility. It could be energetic or calm, structured or spontaneous, shared by many or enjoyed alone. A child tossing a ball against a wall, a group racing through fields, an adult throwing a discus into open-air all, were part of the same pattern. Leisure did not demand grandeur. It asked only for participation. And in that participation, Romans discovered a balance between effort and ease, body and spirit, action and rest. For some, sport was enjoyed not through participation, but through watching. Neighbors sat on steps, leaning against walls or columns, observing games with soft amusement. They commented quietly, sometimes laughing at a misstep, sometimes encouraging a runner with a gentle call. To be a spectator in Rome did not always mean grandeur in an arena. Often, it meant simply watching children toss a ball or friends race across a courtyard, finding joy in the unfolding scene. Seasonal festivals often carried their own games. Villages organized contests of strength, balance, or speed, inviting everyone to take part. Children competed in sack races or wheel games, while adults tried their skill at tugging ropes or tossing stones. These were not professional competitions, but moments of celebration. The entire community shared in the laughter and applause, enjoying the energy of play as much as the games themselves. Leisure in this form bound people together, creating memories tied to both sport and season. The countryside offered even more space for games. On grassy fields, groups could spread out, running freely without the limits of city streets. The sound of footsteps echoed across open air, mingled with the calls of birds above. Throwing contests stretched farther here, with discs or stones flying long distances before settling into the earth. The openness of nature made leisure feel boundless, as if the sky itself watched over the playful contests. It was in such places that Romans felt both energized and free. Children's laughter carried far during these moments. Their games were full of invention, tagging each other in endless chases, inventing rules that shifted as quickly as their energy. Adults remembered their own youth when watching, smiles softening with recognition. In this way, leisure became a thread connecting generations. Play was not confined to one age. It was a universal language spoken in every shout, every race, every burst of laughter beneath the sun. Though simple, these sports carried a kind of discipline. A runner learned how to pace themselves, a thrower how to aim, a child how to share and take turns. These lessons, though hidden within games, prepared people for life beyond play. Leisure, then, was never wasted time. It was practice for patience, resilience, and cooperation, virtues that stretched far beyond the field. What appeared to be simple amusement carried weight that lingered long after the game ended. Even solitary play had its value. A young Roman might toss a ball against a wall, racing to catch it before it bounced twice. Another might practice running alone in a field, testing their strength against their own limits. These moments carried the same spirit as group contests, proving that leisure was as personal as it was communal. Whether shared or solitary, the act of movement gave body and mind a chance to refresh. Leisure, at its core, was about balance. Evenings often brought games to a gentle close. As shadows lengthened, families called children home, their laughter fading into the twilight. Adults, too, ended their races or contests, gathering to share food and drink. The energy of the day gave way to the calm of night, but the memory of play lingered, brightening spirits long after. Leisure flowed naturally into rest, leaving behind the echo of movement as a comfort. The simplicity of Roman sports made them enduring. They required no grand arenas, no elaborate tools, only people willing to move and laugh. This is perhaps why their essence still survives in our own games today. A ball tossed between friends, a race across a field, a game invented on the spot, these are echoes of Roman leisure, still alive in the present. In their universality, they remind us of how little is needed for joy. Community thrived through such contests. Bonds were strengthened not by who won or lost, but by who played together, who watched, and who laughed side by side. Leisure was not about separation, but about unity. Each game wove connections between people, connections that endured far beyond the moment. In this way, Romans carried with them not only memories of games, but also the deeper comfort of belonging. And so, sport in Rome was a quiet celebration of life. It was not driven by spectacle or ambition, but by movement, laughter, and companionship. In running, in throwing, in chasing, and in cheering, Romans found a kind of happiness that required little more than presence. Leisure here was pure in its simplicity, reminding all who joined that joy is often found in the smallest of actions. As the day faded and play gave way to rest, this truth remained as steady as the rhythm of footsteps on stone. Festivals in Rome were moments when the ordinary rhythm of life shifted into something brighter. The city streets, usually filled with the sounds of trade and work, became filled instead with laughter, music, and the movement of crowds. On these days, daily worries were set aside, and the community came together in shared celebration. Though history often remembers Rome for its politics and wars, its festivals remind us of the simple truth that people also longed for joy, togetherness, and the comfort of gathering. For families, festivals were opportunities to reconnect. Parents held children's hands as they wandered through decorated streets, pointing out sights and sharing small treats. Friends found each other among the crowds, embracing and laughing as if time itself had slowed for them. Even strangers felt a bond on these days, united by the shared spirit of the occasion. Leisure here was not solitary, but collective, reminding everyone that happiness often grows strongest when shared. The decorations of festivals carried their own charm. Wreaths of greenery hung from doorways, ribbons fluttered in the breeze, and lamps glowed as the sun faded. These small touches transformed familiar streets into something new, giving the city an air of wonder. Children gazed wide-eyed at the colors, while adults paused to admire the changes. For a moment, the everyday world felt different, as though wrapped in celebration itself. Leisure was heightened by this sense of transformation, by the feeling of stepping into something beyond the ordinary. Food played an important role in gatherings. Tables were set with bread, fruit, cheese, and other simple offerings, enough to be shared among friends and neighbors. Families exchanged dishes, turning meals into feasts without extravagance. The act of eating together carried as much meaning as the food itself. Each bite was accompanied by conversation, by laughter, by the warmth of company. Leisure here was not found in taste alone, but in the bonds strengthened over shared meals. Music drifted through festival spaces, carried by flutes, drums, and voices raised in song. Sometimes, groups formed spontaneously, with singers joining together in simple harmonies. Other times, traveling performers entertained with rhythms that encouraged clapping and dancing. These sounds filled the air, creating an atmosphere of joy that reached every corner. Leisure was amplified by music, by the reminder that sound itself could become a celebration, turning ordinary places into stages of delight. Children played games among the festival crowds. They wove between adults, laughing as they chased each other, inventing contests that fit within the spaces around them. The energy of their play added brightness to the occasion as their laughter mingled with music and conversation. For them, the festival was not only a time of celebration, but of freedom, of discovery, of wonder at the world around them. Leisure in their eyes was boundless, unmeasured, and pure. Even those who preferred quiet found their place in festivals. Benches along the streets or shaded steps near buildings offered resting spots, where people could watch the scene unfold. They did not need to join the dancing or the games to feel part of the celebration. The simple act of observing was enough, letting the sights and sounds wash over them like a gentle current. Leisure could be as active as clapping to music, or as still as sitting in silence amid the joy of others. Markets often flourished during these occasions. Stalls brimmed with goods, from fresh produce to small trinkets, offering people the chance to buy, gift, or simply admire. The act of browsing itself was a form of leisure, as families moved from one stall to another, eyes catching on colors and shapes. Even without purchase, the experience was full, a kind of wandering that filled the senses with new impressions. Festivals turned commerce into something gentler, woven into the fabric of celebration. As the day shifted into evening, lamps and torches began to glow. The streets shimmered with light, carrying the celebration into the night. Songs grew softer, conversations slowed, but the feeling of connection remained strong. People lingered, unwilling to let the day end too soon, savoring each moment as though it were a treasure. Leisure took on a more reflective quality at this hour, as the joy of the day settled into memory. For Romans, festivals were reminders of unity. They showed that joy did not belong only to individuals, but to communities. In shared laughter, in meals eaten together, in music and games, they found a strength beyond themselves. These gatherings were more than entertainment. They were affirmations of life, proof that even in an empire known for power, the essence of humanity was still bound to celebration. Leisure here was a collective heartbeat, steady and strong. Some festivals coincided with the cycles of nature. The arrival of spring, the harvest of autumn, or the turning of the year all brought opportunities to gather. People decorated homes with greenery, lit lamps in honor of changing seasons, and shared food that reflected the time of year. These rituals gave structure to life, reminding Romans of their place within the natural rhythm of the world. Leisure during these occasions was not simply amusement, it was recognition of time's passing, celebrated together with family and neighbors. Seasonal gatherings also offered a chance to honor workers. Farmers, artisans, and traders often set aside their duties during festivals, stepping into roles of participant rather than laborer. For a brief time, the burdens of daily life were lifted, replaced by the joy of celebration. The sound of tools and hammers gave way to music and laughter. Leisure became a reward, a reminder that work was balanced not only by rest, but also by shared joy. Performers found their greatest audiences during festivals. Jugglers tossed balls or torches, musicians played lively melodies, and dancers moved with practiced rhythm. Crowds gathered eagerly, clapping and laughing, encouraging the performers with smiles and shouts. Though these shows were simple by modern standards, they carried an energy that filled the streets. Leisure, in this form, was not only in watching, but in joining the collective cheer, in feeling the energy of the moment shared by all. Travelers passing through Rome often marveled at the scale of its gatherings. To them, the sight of so many people united in celebration was remarkable, a sign of a community strong and connected. They carried these impressions with them, retelling stories of Roman festivals far beyond the city's borders. Leisure thus became part of Rome's reputation, remembered not only for its buildings or armies, but also for its capacity to gather people in joy. Festivals, in their own way, were Rome's soft ambassadors. Food during these times often became more abundant than usual. Large loaves of bread, baskets of fruit, and roasted vegetables filled tables in households and markets alike. Neighbors shared dishes freely, ensuring that no one was left out. Children carried pieces of bread as they wandered, while adults sipped lightly flavored drinks. The meals were not about excess, but about generosity, turning the act of eating into an expression of community. Leisure here was woven into nourishment, as much about giving as it was about receiving. At night, music often grew slower, becoming gentler as the hours passed. Songs shifted from energetic rhythms to softer melodies, allowing people to wind down. Dancers rested, singers lowered their voices, and conversations deepened into more reflective tones. The celebration did not end abruptly, it faded like twilight, carrying people from joy into calm. Leisure revealed itself not only in the energy of play, but also in the peaceful release that followed. Children often fell asleep in their parents' arms during these late hours. Their heads rested on shoulders as the sound of music and conversation lulled them into dreams. For adults, this was a reminder of the cycles of life, that just as one generation enjoyed its games and songs, the next would one day carry them forward. Leisure was thus both present and future, a thread that linked families through time. When the final lamps burned low, the streets of Rome grew quieter. Yet traces of the festival remained, petals scattered on the ground, faint echoes of laughter in the distance, the warm afterglow of community still present in the heart. People returned to their homes carrying not only food or trinkets, but memories of connection. Leisure did not disappear with the extinguished lights, it lingered, settling into the rhythm of daily life, ready to be recalled when needed. Festivals were not constant, but their memory was lasting. The joy of one celebration could carry through many weeks, sustaining spirits until the next gathering. People spoke of the games, the songs, the sights, replaying them in conversation as if reliving the day. Leisure here became more than a single moment. It became a store of happiness, revisited again and again until the cycle returned. And so, Roman festivals remind us that leisure was not always solitary or quiet. Sometimes it was collective, woven into meals, music, and laughter shared by many. These gatherings celebrated both life's abundance and its simplicity, bringing people together in ways that strengthened bonds of community. To picture them now is to see a Rome alive not only with power, but with joy, a Rome where festivals turned ordinary days into extraordinary memories, leaving behind a legacy of togetherness that still speaks across centuries. As the day in Rome slowly gave way to night, the city settled into a quieter rhythm. The clatter of carts lessened, voices softened, and lamps glowed gently from doorways. After the energy of games, gatherings, and daily work, Romans often turned to the simplest leisure of all: rest shared in calm company. Families sat together in courtyards, neighbors lingered on steps, and friends strolled slowly beneath the fading light. Leisure in these final hours was not about activity, but about stillness, about letting the day's weight drift away. Imagine a Roman family seated around a modest table. Bread, fruit, and a small dish of olives are passed quietly between them. Their conversation is unhurried, touching lightly on the events of the day. perhaps recalling a moment of laughter or offering a gentle reflection. Children grow drowsy, their heads resting against a parent's arm, while the glow of a single lamp flickers across their faces. This was leisure in its purest form, time not filled with tasks, but with presence, with the comfort of simply being together. Above, the stars stretched wide across the sky, unbroken by the lights of modern cities. Romans looked upward, recognizing the familiar constellations that had guided travelers and inspired stories for generations. Though they may not have understood the heavens as we do now, they found comfort in their steadiness. To sit beneath the stars was to feel part of something vast, to let the mind wander beyond the boundaries of stone walls and city streets. Leisure here was contemplative, a quiet surrender to the beauty of the night. Street musicians sometimes played softly in the distance. The faint notes of a flute or the strum of a lyre drifted across the air, blending with the hum of voices and the chirping of night insects. People did not gather in great numbers for these late tunes. Instead, the music became part of the city's background, a gentle accompaniment to rest. Leisure in this form was not performance, but presence music simply existing in the air, adding warmth to the silence. Neighbors often paused in their evening routines to greet one another. A kind word exchanged at the gate, a short story shared over the wall, or even a silent wave of acknowledgement all added to the fabric of Roman nights. These gestures carried no expectation, no weight beyond friendliness. Yet they strengthened bonds, reminding people that even in quiet, they were not alone. Leisure was not only found in games or feasts, but in the brief and gentle ties of community. In rural areas, nights carried their own atmosphere. Families sat outside farmhouses, listening to the calls of owls and the rustle of fields in the breeze. Fires burned low, casting shifting patterns of light across the ground. Without the distractions of the city, the silence of the countryside grew even deeper, broken only by the voices of family and the natural sounds around them. Leisure in these places was shaped by nature, by the steady rhythm of wind and earth. Children drifted into sleep during these hours. Their play from earlier in the day faded into dreams, their breathing slow and steady as parents carried them indoors. Adults, too, began to settle, their movements slower, their voices softer. The transition from day to night carried a sense of closure, but also of renewal, the assurance that rest would prepare them for another morning. Leisure here was the bridge between effort and restoration, between wakefulness and sleep. For travelers, Rome by night held a different kind of leisure. After long days on the road, the city's quiet corners provided places to pause, to sit, and to feel part of a larger whole. Inns, courtyards, and shaded steps became shelters not just for the body, but for the spirit. A simple conversation with a fellow traveler, or the act of sharing food with a stranger, turned the loneliness of distance into companionship. Leisure, in this way, healed more than fatigue. Even in silence, the city carried signs of life. A dog barked in the distance, footsteps echoed softly along stone streets, and the faint glow of lamps marked the presence of households at rest. These quiet sounds reminded Romans that they belonged to a community larger than themselves. Leisure at night was both individual and collective, shaped by the shared act of winding down. Together, yet apart, the people of Rome embraced the calm that fell steadily across the city. Thus, the peaceful endings of Roman days reveal another side of leisure. It was not only about laughter, games, or gatherings, but also about release, letting the day pass into memory with gentleness. These moments of calm, beneath stars or lamplight, were as essential as any festival or sport. They gave shape to life, reminding Romans of the value of rest as much as of action. To imagine them now is to step into that same calm, to breathe with their rhythm, and to find our own quiet within their silence. As lamps flickered low and families withdrew into their homes, the Roman night deepened. Streets emptied of noise, leaving only the faint echo of footsteps and the hush of distant voices. The city, so full of movement during the day, seemed transformed into a place of stillness. For those awake, this was leisure in its purest form, the ability to sit, to breathe, and to feel the world pause around them. It was a reminder that rest itself was an essential part of life's balance. Some households lingered in conversation even as the night grew late. Friends and family members told quiet stories, sharing memories or simple thoughts about the hours that had passed. Their voices rose and fell gently, weaving comfort into the air. These conversations were not hurried, for there was no task waiting to pull them away. Leisure was measured in words, in silences, in the steady rhythm of companionship at day's end. The stars above Rome became silent companions to these moments. With no rush of traffic or glow of modern lights, the sky stretched wide and clear. Many found themselves gazing upward, tracing familiar patterns, or simply letting their eyes wander into the endless depth. The heavens seemed to offer a canvas of calm, one that reflected back into the soul. Leisure in these quiet stargazing moments gave Romans a chance to feel both small and infinite at once. In villages, the night carried even fewer sounds. A dog barked once, then silence returned. A breeze rustled through leaves, carrying with it the scent of earth. Families gathered close to hearths, their fires burning low, their laughter replaced by whispers. Leisure here was shaped by simplicity, by the comfort of warmth, by the presence of loved ones close at hand. It was a pattern repeated through countless nights, as steady as the turning of the seasons. For travelers, resting after a long journey, the quiet of Roman nights was a blessing. The sound of running water from fountains, the safety of sheltered courtyards, and the kindness of shared meals all brought relief. Leisure for them was not elaborate, but it was profound rest for the body, calm for the mind, and the assurance of another day ahead. To find peace in an unfamiliar place was itself a gift, and Rome often offered it through its quiet evenings. Children dreamed of the games they had played earlier. In sleep, their laughter continued, their imaginations still alive with races, stories, and adventures. Adults, too, carried memories into rest, the sound of music, the warmth of gatherings, the taste of meals shared. Leisure did not end with waking life. It flowed into dreams, reminding Romans that joy could be carried forward, even into slumber. The night became not an ending, but a bridge into renewal. As the city grew quieter still, a kind of harmony settled over it. From the smallest household to the largest villa, from crowded neighborhoods to rural farms, the rhythm of rest united everyone. Differences of wealth, age, and role faded in the face of the same need for peace. Leisure, in this way, became universal, a reminder that no matter who they were, all Romans shared in the same cycle of work, play, and rest. The peace of these endings carried lessons as well. That joy does not always need to be loud, nor leisure grand. That the simplest acts, conversation, stillness, the sight of stars, can hold as much beauty as the most elaborate festivals. Romans, like us, discovered that happiness often lies in the spaces between tasks, in the quiet pauses that give life its shape. To remember their nights is to remember our own need for balance. And so, As this journey through Roman leisure draws to a close, we are left with an image of calm. Games played by children, music drifting through courtyards, laughter at festivals, quiet walks through the forum, and evenings spent beneath the stars. These moments, woven together, paint a picture of Rome not as empire alone, but as a place of people seeking peace in their own ways. Leisure was their bridge between duty and rest, their reminder that life held joys beyond labor. Thank you for listening to this gentle story of Roman leisure. May its calm images accompany you into rest tonight, steady and quiet. And when you return, we will step into another world, exploring a question that has fascinated many. Why did the ancient Egyptians bury their pharaohs with so much stuff? Until then, may peace linger in your evening, just as it once did in the quiet nights of Rome.